Now, the host laughed at Jason Statham's wife's faith, live in front of millions. But what happened seconds later silenced the entire studio and changed everything. Stay with us until the end, because the moment no one expected will make you rethink what it truly means to have faith. And if you think you've seen Jason furious on screen, wait until you see what he does when someone hurts the woman he loves, without lifting a single finger. The studio lights glared like judgment, sharp and blinding, casting long shadows across the stage floor. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, laughter simmering beneath their breath, not knowing they were seconds away from watching something that would leave them different. In the center of it all, two chairs waited. One would carry a man known for fists, fire, and fury. The other, a woman known for light. Not the kind that shines from fame, but the kind that quietly warms the room. Jason Statham stepped onto the stage with the grace of someone who had nothing left to prove. He wasn't smiling, but he wasn't scowling either. There was a calmness in him that didn't belong to the spotlight. He wore a simple black suit, tailored yet unassuming, like everything about him had been stripped down to its most essential form. Rosie Huntington-Whiteley followed just a step behind, a figure of elegance, poised and serene, her pale dress flowing like still water. Around her neck, delicate and almost imperceptible beneath the lights, hung a small gold cross. The applause thundered. The host, Ellen DeGeneres, sat with that familiar grin, the kind that didn't reach the eyes. She was loved by millions, feared by many, and respected by few. Known for her razor wit and ruthless sarcasm, she had turned interviews into arenas. And tonight, she had her sights set on something she didn't understand. The beginning was smooth. Talk of films, training regimens, and inside jokes. Jason answered with brief nods and dry remarks that drew laughs. Rosie smiled warmly. They were the perfect contrast. He, the storm on pause, she, the quiet after. But then, it shifted. Ellen tilted her head, that smile widening just enough to signal the attack. "So, Rosie," she said, tapping her cards against her knee. "There's been talk about how grounded you are, how calm you seem. People say it's because of your faith." A pause. "Still pray, even with all this madness around you?" Rosie's smile didn't falter. She nodded gently, her hand brushing the cross at her neck without effort. The audience chuckled, not cruelly, but with the kind of disbelief that comes when modernity meets reverence. Ellen leaned in, amused. "Forgive me, but really? You believe there's someone up there watching over us?" Her voice rose theatrically. "Even after everything this world has shown us?" The audience laughed louder this time. Ellen laughed with them. Jason didn't. He didn't frown. He didn't shift in his seat. But something subtle changed. His eyes locked on the host, not with rage, that would have been easy, but with stillness so sharp it cut through the stage haze. Rosie, still composed, let her hand fall back into her lap. She didn't need to defend anything. That had never been her role. Ellen smiled wider, mistaking the silence for submission. "Come on, Jason. You don't strike me as the praying type. Or are you secretly lighting candles and confessing your sins every night?" The crowd roared. He didn't answer. He just sat there, the kind of stillness that feels louder than shouting. And that silence, that refusal to play the game, suddenly turned the laughter hollow. The narrator inside all of us began to whisper, "Something's not right. Something's about to snap." The camera zoomed in subtly, focusing on Rosie's necklace, now catching the light just enough to gleam. It wasn't jewelry anymore. It was a symbol, not of religion, not even of tradition, but of quiet, invisible strength. And Jason, the man the world had come to expect to explode, simply placed a hand on Rosie's knee. Soft, steady. Ellen wasn't done. "You know," she continued, tapping her microphone for effect, "I've always found religion charming, like fairy tales for people who need happy endings." Another pause. "So I have to ask, do you actually believe your prayers do anything? That someone's listening? This time, Rosie looked at her directly. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes did. There was no answer, just presence. And Jason? He stood up. The sound of the chair moving back echoed like a gunshot in the studio. The audience froze. The camera wobbled slightly as the operator adjusted in surprise. Ellen blinked. She hadn't expected that. Jason didn't speak. He didn't scowl. He just stood, tall, centered, absolutely unshaken. The kind of stance a man takes not before a fight, but before something sacred. He looked at Rosie, then looked out at the sea of faces, at the lights, the silence, the unblinking red camera in front of him. The moment held, too long for TV, too heavy for jokes, and then the screen cut to commercial. But what the cameras didn't catch, though, not yet, was the slight flicker in the studio lights, the faint hum in the speakers, or the producer off stage whispering into his headset. Did anyone else feel that? The commercials rolled like static, noisy, empty, irrelevant. But inside the studio, something had cracked. Not the floor, not the lights, something beneath all of it. The laughter that once echoed with certainty now echoed with memory. The silence Jason Statham left behind by simply standing, not yelling, not retaliating, just being, lingered like smoke after a fire. When the cameras returned, they tried to pick up where they left off. The audience clapped, but softer. The music played, but it sounded rehearsed. And Ellen DeGeneres, queen of sarcasm and stage control, returned to her seat with a smile that didn't fit her face anymore. Something in her expression looked uncertain, off-tempo, like a pianist striking the wrong key but pretending it was jazz. Jason sat down again, slow and deliberate, not defeated, not victorious, just anchored. Rosie hadn't moved at all. Her fingers were interlocked in her lap, the cross around her neck resting like a secret between worlds. Ellen cleared her throat. The cue cards in her hand shook, just barely, but enough for the camera to notice. She tried to crack another joke, something about prayer and parking spots, but the punchline stumbled out of her mouth like it had lost its way. There were chuckles, scattered and cautious, as if people weren't sure if they were still allowed to laugh. And then, nothing, not a joke, not a jab, just a pause. In that moment of uncomfortable stillness, the screen began to shift, not literally, not with graphics or transitions, but emotionally. The narration softened, the camera lens seemed to breathe, and the story left the stage for just a moment. It carried us backward, into the quiet corridors of memory, not Jason's, Rosie's. We saw her on a hospital floor, curled in a chair beside a bed. No makeup, no spotlight, just a woman holding a hand that wasn't squeezing back. Jason had been there for days, hooked to machines, silence pounding louder than any siren. A car accident on set. A delayed ambulance. The news said, stable. The doctors said, wait. But Rosie, she never said anything. She prayed, not loudly, not with candles, just with closed eyes, breath held and hands trembling. She never posted about it. She didn't ask for support online. She didn't demand miracles. She just sat with him, hour after hour, day after day. And when no one was looking, when the room was empty, she'd whisper something to that tiny gold cross, the same one now hanging around her neck. Back in the studio, Ellen tried to steer the show again. She shifted in her seat, spoke with forced enthusiasm, pulled another card from her stack. Let's talk about the campaign, she said, her voice trying to find footing in safer territory. You two are raising money for children's hospitals, right? Rosie smiled. Jason nodded. But the moment had moved past logistics. The room wasn't craving numbers or slogans anymore. It was waiting for something real. So the screen kept pulling us deeper. Testimonies appeared like soft echoes. A nurse who had seen Rosie holding Jason's hand night after night. A fan who had witnessed Rosie helping an overwhelmed mother in a waiting room, not as a model, but as a woman who understood fear. A friend from childhood who remembered the way Rosie used to cry behind her church when her parents fought at home, not because anyone told her to believe in God, but because she needed something bigger than the chaos around her. The stories weren't loud. They didn't scream. They flowed in like mist, curling around the edges of the narrative until they filled the space no spotlight could. And the audience, they listened, not because they were told to, but because something ancient had awakened, the part of them that remembered vulnerability, the part of them that knew grief, that once prayed and felt no answer, but still hoped someone, somewhere, might be listening. Ellen felt it too. Her jokes slowed. Her smile wavered. She flipped through her cue cards faster now, as if trying to outrun the mood. And then she said it, the line that tried to break everything again. "So," she asked, casually cruel, "you still really believe your prayers do anything? That someone's actually out there?" The room shrank. Time held its breath. Rosie didn't flinch. She looked down, her fingers brushing the edge of the cross again, that same familiar motion that now seemed lit from within. Not dramatic, not performative, just grounding. Jason, still sitting, glanced toward the audience. His jaw clenched once, not in anger, in restraint, in patience. Because there comes a moment in every storm when the thunder steps aside and lets the silence speak. And that's when he rose. Again, but this time there was no music, no applause, no camera movement. He stood slowly, eyes locked on the floor for a heartbeat, then lifted to meet Ellen's gaze. The audience didn't move. Rosie didn't blink. Ellen opened her mouth, to speak, to joke, to reclaim control, but the words never came. The lights above them flickered once, then again. And then, they stopped. Everything stopped. The image froze. Not just for the viewers. Inside the studio, the screens turned black. A sharp hum filled the speakers, and the sound died. The feed didn't cut to commercial. There were no graphics, no error messages, just silence, complete, heavy, sacred. For 17 seconds, the world held its breath, and no one watching, not in the studio, not at home, not anywhere, could say for sure whether it was a glitch or something greater. 17 seconds, that was all. No countdown, no voiceover, no commercial break. Just 17 seconds of darkness followed by something even more jarring. Silence. Not the awkward kind, not the absence of words. The kind that commands stillness. That makes you forget you're watching a show. That makes you feel as if something invisible has entered the room and dared everyone to breathe. Inside the studio, no one moved. Not the audience, not the camera crew, not the host, and not Jason. He stood exactly where he had been before the blackout, his hands at his sides, his eyes soft, unwavering. The emergency lights along the floor cast long, diffused shadows up the walls, painting the sleek black set in faint amber and ghostly blue. Rosie sat beneath him, hands still folded, her expression untouched by the surreal shift. Like she'd seen this kind of silence before, and knew exactly what it meant. The monitors blinked erratically and then steadied. Everything returned. Lights. Sound, the steady blink of red on the main recording lens. But something else did not return. The rhythm of the show, the sarcasm, the safety, the social rules everyone relied on to laugh at pain and brush off belief. That part of the set stayed behind in the void. Ellen DeGeneres remained in her chair, her mouth slightly parted, her expression vacant. She blinked once, then twice. Her cue cards slipped from her fingers and landed on the floor without a sound. The microphone clipped to her collar picked up her next breath, shallow, stuttering. Jason sat down without saying a word, and still, no one knew what to do. So the story shifted. This time, the narration didn't take us into Rosie's past. It took us into his. But not the Jason Statham of magazine covers and action films, not the man with clenched fists and impossible escapes. The narration peeled back the layers until only the man remained. We saw him in a dim hospital corridor, hunched beside Rosie after a miscarriage neither of them had spoken about publicly. We saw him in a church pew, not during service, But hours before, when the room was empty and echoing, his head bowed, his fingers tangled, his jaw locked in a battle between rage and surrender. We saw him next to a hospital bed where Rosie's mother took her last breath, Jason holding both their hands, long after the monitor flatlined. No cameras, no audience, no lines to deliver, and still, he stayed. Because somewhere along the way he stopped needing to understand faith, to respect it. And somewhere deeper still, he started to wonder if Rosie's strength, that calm, steady warmth that seemed to carry him through his darkest days, wasn't just love, it was prayer. A prayer she never forced on him, never preached, just lived, like breath, like instinct. Back in the studio, Ellen shifted slightly in her seat. The tremble had returned, this time in her hand, resting against the edge of the table. She tried to speak, but her voice cracked halfway up her throat. She cleared it, forced a chuckle, and said something too low for the mics to catch. But Jason heard it. He didn't react, didn't lean in, just sat with her. Present. The narrator softened again, as if choosing each word with reverence. What do you do when silence speaks louder than sarcasm? When presence becomes a mirror? When someone shows you what grace looks like? Not by explaining it, but by being it. The camera turned gently to the audience now. Tears. One woman in the second row held her hands together like she hadn't done since childhood. A man in the back stood silently, hand over mouth. Someone else mouthed the words, "I'm sorry," to no one in particular. And Ellen, for the first time in years, didn't know how to end the segment. There were no jokes left, no cards to pull, no way out but through. So she leaned forward, elbows on the desk, her eyes glassy. She looked at Rosie, then at Jason, and then, somehow, at herself. And she asked one question, but not to them, to the air, to whatever had just shifted the walls of that studio. Did anyone else feel that? The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was clear. It was the kind of silence that follows confession, not punishment, just truth. The camera panned out slowly, capturing the three of them in frame. Ellen shaken, Rosie serene, Jason still. The cross around Rosie's neck shined gently in the soft light, no longer just an accessory, but a thread that had stitched the entire moment together. The show ended early. No final joke, no recap, no outro music, just the lingering hum of hearts still beating faster than they should. But what no one knew, not the viewers, not the staff, not even Jason, was that backstage in a dim control room, a camera that was never meant to record, had captured everything. And the footage would leak within hours, igniting a firestorm the network would never be able to contain. The footage leaked before the network could erase it. Not the clean, polished version that aired. Not the edited, cut-to-commercial version. The raw feed, the 17 seconds of darkness, the flicker, the silence, the trembling voice of Char Ellen DeGeneres. The cross, the way Jason stood, the way Rosie didn't stand, because she didn't need to, and the internet stopped. No music, no memes, no mocking compilations. The clip wasn't shared like gossip. It was shared like scripture. People didn't repost it for laughs. They reposted it for stillness, for what it felt like, for the way their own breath had paused when the studio went quiet, for the way they looked at their own reflection afterward and whispered, "Did I feel that too?" It spread faster than anything the show had ever produced. News anchors debated it. Tech experts tried to explain the flicker. Audio engineers cited system glitches and frequency interference, but nothing they said undid the feeling. And then came the twist. A former producer, pale and visibly shaken, uploaded a video of his own. He stared into his phone camera. No script, no filters, just a man breaking the silence. "I worked there for 4 years," he said. "It was understood, never officially, but it was there. Spiritual guests were targets, not interviewees. You provoke them, you push them, you trigger something, get a reaction. That's the clip the network wants. He sighed. But what Jason did, that wasn't the reaction they expected. Within hours, testimonies flooded the digital sea. People from every corner of the world, some religious, some not, describing what the video had done to them. Parents crying in parked cars, teenagers rewatching it in the dark, veterans, widows, nurses, students. A woman wrote, "I haven't prayed in 19 years. I didn't even know I remembered how. But when Rosie looked down at that cross, I did." A man posted, "I was going to end my life that night. The silence saved me." Another, "I don't believe in anything, but watching him stand for her made me want to." And Ellen? She vanished. No social media, no statements. The network paused her show indefinitely. For a week, she was a ghost, until a single photo surfaced. Ellen DeGeneres, no makeup, sitting on a park bench in central London, alone, hands in her lap, a cross, small and silver, resting between her fingers. It wasn't clear if it was hers, or if it was something someone had given her. But the world didn't need clarity. It needed that image. And then, quietly, Ellen returned. Not with fanfare, just a live stream. No audience, no applause. Just her, seated in front of a soft lamp holding a cup of tea. She looked tired, not broken, not shattered. Stripped. She spoke for 7 minutes. About silence, about fear, about control, and how quickly it slips through your fingers when truth walks into the room. She didn't apologize in the way PR companies train you to. She simply said, "I mocked her faith because I lost mine a long time ago. And I mocked his silence because I didn't understand it, but I do now. I think I do." She paused, then added, "I don't know what to call it yet, but I felt it, and maybe that's enough for now." The internet didn't cancel her. Strangely, it embraced her, not because she changed overnight, but because her fracture mirrored theirs. And somewhere in that fracture, something gentle began to grow. Meanwhile, Jason and Rosie said nothing. No interviews, no statements, just one photo, posted to Rosie's account. A hand, hers, holding Jason's. In the corner of the image, blurry but unmistakable, sat the cross. No caption, none needed. But something unexpected happened days later on a different show. Jason returned, alone. A quieter program, less fame, fewer eyes. He was asked why he'd come. He shrugged. "Not to talk," he said, "just to listen." The host blinked, confused. "But we brought you here to speak." Jason tilted his head. Sometimes speaking is the problem. And then, like a ripple moving backward through time, the silence returned. Not the same kind, not haunted or holy, just human. And that was enough. Because not every story ends with a punchline. Some end with breath, with presence, with the quiet return of dignity. The narrator returned one last time, not as a voice of authority, but as a witness. In a world addicted to noise, he reminded us, strength can be silent, and faith doesn't always wear robes. Sometimes it wears a black suit, sits beside a woman holding a cross, and stands, not to fight, but to honor the one who never stopped believing for both of them. And somewhere, in a hospital waiting room, a girl watches the clip again on her phone. She presses her hands together, closes her eyes, and doesn't say a word, because for the first time in years, she doesn't feel alone. If this moved you in any way, share this video with someone who also needs to be reminded that faith is not weakness, and that sometimes silence speaks louder than any response. Leave a comment below telling us where this story hit you the hardest. Subscribe to the channel now, turn on notifications, and get ready, because every week we bring stories that don't scream, but you'll never forget them.